The Texas Unaliving Fields is a title used to roughly denote the area surrounding the Interstate Highway 45 corridor southeast of Houston, where since the early 1970s more than 30 bodies have been found, and specifically to a 25-acre patch of the land in League City, Texas, where 4 women were found between 1983 and 1991. The bodies along the corridor were mainly of girls or young women. Furthermore, many additional young girls have disappeared from this area who are still missing. Most of the victims were aged between 12 and 25 years old. Some shared similar physical features such as similar hairstyles. Despite the efforts by the League City, Texas police, along with assistance from the FBI, very few of these unalivings have been solved. The area has been described as After visiting some of the sites of recovered bodies in League City, Amy Kanan Mann, director of the film based on the Texas Unaliving Fields, commented, "A task force composed of local law enforcement officials and FBI agents called Operation HALT Homicide Abduction Liaison Team has been formed to investigate the incidents. Confirmed or suspected victims listed chronologically are Colette Anise Wilson, 13, disappeared from the Alvin bus stop on County Road 99 and Highway 6 in Alvin, Texas after she was dropped off by her band director on the 17th of June 1971. Her body was found 5 months after on the 26th of November 1971 near the Addicks Reservoir just 35 yards from the location where the body of Gloria Gonzalez was recovered 4 months later. Brenda K. Jones, 14, was last seen while walking to Galveston Hospital, close to Interstate 45 on her way to visit her aunt on the 1st of July 1971 in Galveston, Texas. Her body was found on the 2nd of July 1971, floating in nearby Galveston Bay near Pelican Island, close to the Seawolf Parkway near Interstate Highway 45 the next day. Rhonda Renee Johnson, 14, and Sharon Lynn Shaw, 13, disappeared in Harris County, Texas, on the afternoon of the 4th of August 1971. Both were last seen walking along Seawall Boulevard in Galveston near a local beach. On the 3rd of January 1972, 2 boys fishing in Clear Lake discovered a human skull floating in the water, which they had initially believed to be a sports ball. 6 weeks later, searchers discovered the rest of the body, along with that of another girl, in a marsh near the lake. According to a coroner's inquest filed on the 17th of February 1972, the skull found in the lake was determined via dental records to have belonged to Shaw. Additionally, a crucifix found wrapped around the jawbone of the skull was identified by Shaw's mother to have belonged to her daughter. The other body found in the marsh was positively identified as Johnson. Gloria Ann Gonzalez, 19, was last seen on the 28th of October 1971 near her apartment on Jacqueline Street in Houston, Texas. Her skeletal remains were found near Addicks Reservoir in the same area as Colette Wilson on the 23rd of November 1971. Allison Ann Craven, 12, was reported missing by her mother on the 9th of November 1971. When she returned to her apartment in Houston, Texas, near Interstate 45, after completing shopping errands for 1 hour. 3 months later, police found Craven's partial remains in a nearby field, 2 hands along with bones and an arm and some teeth. On the 25th of February 1972, the rest of the skeleton was found in Pearland, Texas field, also near to Interstate 45 and 10 miles from where she was last seen. Debbie Kathleen Ackerman and Maria Talbot Johnson, both 15, were last seen attempting to hitchhike to Houston, Texas, near an Island ice cream shop in Galveston, Texas on the 15th of November 1971. Witnesses reported seeing a man in a white van stopping by the curbside and picking up the girls after agreeing to drive them to Houston. Their bodies were found bound and partially nude in Turner's Bayou on the 17th of November 1971 near Texas City. Kimberly Ray Pitchford, 16, was last seen at Dobie High School in Houston, Texas, while she was there for a driving test on the 3rd of January 1973. Her body was found by 2 teenage boys 2 days later in a ditch in Angleton, Texas, around noon on Country Road 65 in Brazoria County on the 5th of January 1973. Brooks Bracewell, 12, and Georgia Caroline Gear, 14, were both last seen at the Utotem convenience store off Interstate 45 on the 6th of September 1974. At the time of their disappearance, police insisted that Bracewell and Gear were runaways, only beginning to investigate foul play in 1981. In 1976, the partial skeletal remains belonging to Bracewell were found by police in a culvert in Alvin, Texas, nearby the pair's last known location, but were not connected to Bracewell and Gear at the time. and were only identified as Bracewell after a new detective took over the case in 1981. The ditch where they were originally found was re-examined on the 3rd of April 1981, and more remains were found, as well as fragments of gold sweater and plaid pants. Suzanne Susie Bowers, 12, was last seen walking along a 3-minute route between her grandmother's house at 4000 block of Avenue S and her own home at 3100 block of Avenue P at around 10:45 a.m. on the 21st of May 1977 in Galveston, Texas. She was going home to get her swimsuit to go to the beach. Her skeletal remains were found 2 years later in Alta Loma, Texas on the 25th of March 1979. Tina Gail Klaus, 17, and Harold Dean Klaus Jr., 21, were found on the 12th of January 1981 in northern Harris County, Texas, in a boggy wooded area just north of the Houston city limits. A civilian's dog, left to wander into the woods, returned to its owner with a decomposing human arm. Search parties prompted by the dog's discovery subsequently found the heavily decomposed bodies of the Klaus couple near Wallersville Road. Despite significant decomposition, it was determined that both were victims of homicide. Tina had been strangled and Harold had been bound and gagged before being beaten to death. In 2021, forensics genealogists identified Dean and Tina. In 2022, their daughter Holly Marie was located alive in Oklahoma. Michelle Angela Garvey, 15, went missing from New London, Connecticut, presumably after running away from home on the 1st of June 1982. Her body was found on the 1st of July 1982 in Baytown, Texas, 1 month after she went missing. Her cause of death was determined to be strangulation. There was evidence that she'd been essayed. Her body was found wearing brown clothing, including a long-sleeved button-down shirt with a distinct horse embroidery on the breast pocket. She was disposed of in a field after she died, possibly hours after her murder. She was buried near to 2 unidentified murder victims found in 1981, who were identified in 2021 as Dean and Tina Klaus. She was identified in January 2014 through the efforts of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the Harris County Police Department, who had contacted her family and had obtained samples of her DNA for testing in August 2013. Susan Lee Eads, 20, was a cocktail waitress who had left her family home in Harris County, Texas at around 4:30 p.m. on the 30th of August 1983 to a workplace. The following day, a motorist discovered her body a few miles from her home. She was naked and had bruises on her back and face. She had been strangled to death with the bodysuit she was wearing, which had been used as a tourniquet. Her car was found parked adjacent to the vacant lot where she was found. Her autopsy determined that she had been essayed. She was last seen at a local club with a white man wearing a cowboy hat. Her mother received phone calls from an unidentified man who claimed to have photos of her daughter. He referred to himself as Bill and said that he lived in Houston, Texas. A DNA profile extracted from Eads' body was matched to Arthur Raymond Davis Jr., a Vietnam War veteran and a boat captain. He died on the 16th of January 1984 after a single vehicle accident. Heidi Marie Villarreal Fay, 25, was a cocktail waitress last seen on the 10th of October 1983 at a convenience store located off West Main Street and Hobbs in League City, Texas. On the 4th of April 1984, her remains were discovered after a dog brought her skull to a nearby house in Calder Field, on the 3000 block of Calder Road near League City, Texas. Sandra K. Ramber, 14, was last seen at a family's home in Santa Fe, Texas on the 26th of October 1983. She was determined to be missing due to the fact that the front door was left open, food was in the oven, and her purse and coat was still in the house. She was initially believed to have gone to the store for a moment, but she never returned. Laura Lynn Miller, 16, was last seen on the 10th of September 1984 at the same convenience store. Villarreal Fay was last seen a year earlier in League City, Texas, using a payphone to call her boyfriend. Her remains were found on the 2nd of February 1986, 60 feet away from where the police had found Villarreal Fay the year before. Ellen Ray Simpson Beeson, 29, was last seen with her friends on the 29th of July 1985 at the Texas Moon Club in League City, Texas, where she met local construction worker Clyde Hendrick. Later that evening, she told her friends that her and Hendrick made plans to go swimming. Her decomposed remains were discovered underneath a sofa in a wooded area beside Old Causeway Road in Galveston County. The medical examiner was unable to determine the cause of the death at the time, but upon the exhumation of her remains in 2012, it was revealed that she had suffered several severe skull fractures. Michelle Doherty Thomas, 17, was last seen leaving her familial residence in Santa Fe, Texas on the 5th of October 1985, after having returned home from work at a Galveston, Texas gas station. She left to meet with friends at a nearby nightclub located on Galveston Island later that evening. Acquaintances claimed that she had stopped at a convenience store on the way to the nightclub, and Michelle had gotten into a vehicle with two men. She has not been seen since. Authorities believe she may have been abducted and murdered. Audrey Lee Cook, 30, was last heard from in late December 1985. Her remains were found in a field in the 3000 block of Calder Road on the same day that the body of Laura Miller was located nearby. Their bodies were not buried, rather hidden from view. Both were left in a supine position near a tree. Cook had a small caliber gunshot wound to the back, severing her spine, and she had suffered additional injuries to several ribs. She was identified in April 2019 along with Donna Prudhomme by family tree DNA using genetic genealogy. Shelley Kathleen Sykes, 19, was last seen leaving her job as a waitress at Guido Seafood Restaurant on the beachfront in Galveston, Texas, just prior to 12 a.m. on the 24th of May 1986. Her car was found the next day, stuck in mud, blood-stained and abandoned at the side of Interstate 45 access road, south of the Galveston Causeway. The driver's side window had been broken and bloodstains were recovered from the door and the driver's seat. Her body has never been found, but John Robert King and Gerald Peters Wast have been charged and convicted of her murder. Suzanne Renee Richardson, 22, was employed as a night clerk at the Casa del Mar condominiums on Seawald Boulevard in Galveston, Texas. She was last seen at work at 6 a.m. on the 7th of October 1988 by resort security guards, and shortly afterwards another employee who was sleeping in the room above Richardson's office heard a loud female scream. The witness claimed to have heard a car door slam shut accompanied by another scream and the sound of a car speeding away from the parking lot. A guest arrived at Richardson's office to check out at around 6:30 a.m. and discovered the desk abandoned. Donna Marie Prudhomme, 34, was last seen in July 1991 in Nassau Bay, Texas. On the 8th of September 1991, a local resident came across a badly decomposed body in a field beside Calder Road. A medical examination concluded that she had died at least 6 weeks prior, yet a cause of death could not be determined. She was identified in April 2019 along with Audrey Cook by family tree DNA with the use of genetic genealogy. Lynette Bibbs, 14, and Tamara Fisher, 15, disappeared on the 1st of February 1996 after visiting a Houston, Texas club for teenagers. A 22-year-old male later claimed to have dropped off the friends off at a motel near the city centre on Old Spanish Trail. The bodies of the two girls were found dumped by a rural road 2 days later on the 3rd of February 1996 in Cleveland, Texas. Crystal Jean Baker, 13, was last seen near Interstate 45 on the 5th of March 1996 in Texas City, leaving her grandmother's home for a convenience store to use the phone after an argument. Crystal was last seen using the phone at a local convenience store to ask a friend if she could stay with her. 2 hours later, her body was found. She had been strangled and dumped over the Interstate 10 Trinity River Bridge. Baker's great-aunt was Marilyn Monroe. Kevin Edison Smith was convicted of capital murder in her death in 2012 and sentenced to life in prison. In 2019, Governor Greg Abbott signed into law the Crystal Jean Baker Act, which permits the collection of DNA from individuals arrested for certain felonies prior to conviction. Laura Smither, 12, was last seen in Friendswood, Texas, jogging down to her home street on the 3rd of April 1997 after telling her mother she was going on a 20-minute run. 17 days later, on the 20th of April 1997, her body was found in a retention pond in Pasadena, Texas. In 1998, her parents established the Laura Recovery Center, a non-profit organization that aids in the search and recovery of kidnapping victims. Kellyanne Cox, 20, was last seen on the 15th of July 1997 at Conoco gas station and a convenience store in Denton, Texas, after locking herself out of her car and making a call to her boyfriend for help using the station's outdoor payphone. Jessica Lee Kane, 17, was last seen at the Bennigan's restaurant near Baybrook Mall in Clear Lake, Texas, dining with friends at around 1:30 a.m. She was reported missing on the 17th of August 1997 when her father found her truck abandoned along Interstate 45. On the 18th of March 2016, her remains were finally found in a field off East Orem Road next to Hobby Airport. Suspected serial killer William Lewis Reese directed investigators to search the area which her remains were found. Reese was convicted of the murders of Smither, Cox and Kane in June 2022. Tot Tran Herriman, 57, was visiting relatives in Texas and had mapped out a route between League City and Corpus Christi, Texas, and planned to drive along Highway 35. She departed at approximately 5 a.m. on the 12th of July 2001 from her son's residence near League City. She was last seen driving her 1995 Lincoln Continental along Highway 35. Sarah Ann Lewis Trusty, 23, was last seen during the evening hours of the day in Algoa, Texas, near a church riding her bicycle at around 11 p.m. on the 12th of July 2002. Her body was discovered on the 28th of July 2002 in Texas City in a nearby reservoir by fishermen. Teresa Lynn Venegas, 16, was last seen in Dickinson, Texas, walking near the Green Cay subdivision on the 31st of October 2006. 3 days later, her body was found strangled at and with her hair cut off in a field across from Dickinson High School. In 1972, a gas station operator and convicted ex-offender from Galveston, Michael Lloyd South, became a suspect in the murders of Rhonda Johnson and Sharon Shaw. After hours of interrogation, he confessed to the murders. He was taken to the district prison, later aiding with locating the bodies. In the following months, he retracted his confession, claiming that he'd been tortured into confessing, with the interrogators suffocating him with a plastic bag, burning him with cigarette butts and the radiator, as well as being assaulted by the police chief, Don Morris. Nevertheless, on the 18th of September 1974, he was convicted of killing Shaw and received a life imprisonment term, despite the fact that his confessions showed great discrepancies concerning the victim's clothing, the date of the murders, the locations of the bodies and how they were killed, and various other details. 3 years later, in 1976, Don Morris and his deputy, Tommy Deal, were arrested and convicted of various crimes including torture and other misconduct against detainees. Morris was sentenced to 55 years and Deal 30. After this, Self regularly applied for an appeal but was rejected every time. Michael Self died on the 21st of December 2000, still in custody. It was only after his death that a number of police officials, including the former Harris County District Attorney, stated their belief that Self was wrongly convicted. An investigation by the League City Police and the FBI in the 1970s identified another local resident, Edward Harold Bell, a known exhibitionist, as a suspect. He had been arrested at least 12 times on charges of showing his genitals to children, but each time avoided imprisonment. He lived on a property near the beach in Galveston where he was a silent partner of a surf shop. He even knew 2 of the victims, Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson, who frequented the store. In the mid-1970s, he acquired a plot of land in Dickinson and lived near the place where 2 more of the victims, Brooks Bracewell and Georgia Gear, were last seen alive. In 1978, while aiming on the street in front of a group of teenage girls, Bell was confronted by 26-year-old former Marine Larry Dickens. As his mother called the police, Dickens removed the keys from Bell's vehicle and refused to return them. In retaliation, Bell killed him and fled, but was subsequently apprehended by police. He posted bail several weeks later, and in order to avoid conviction and further incarceration, he fled to Texas and escaped from the US, evading the police for more than 2 decades. In 1993, he was arrested in Panama and extradited back to the US, where he was subsequently convicted of Dickens' murder and received a 70-year sentence. In 1998, Bell wrote several letters to the Harris County Attorney confessing to the murders of 5 girls in 1971 and 6 more between 1974 and 1977. He stated that he didn't remember the names of most of the victims, but confidently stated that he had killed Debbie Ackerman, Maria Johnson, Colette Wilson, and Kimberly Pitchford, as well as 2 other girls whom he had abducted from Webster in August 1971, later identified as Rhonda Johnson and Sharon Shaw. Despite this, Bell was never charged with these murders since no evidence, biological or otherwise, incriminated him. He remained a prime suspect until his death in April 2019. In 2013, Mark Ronald Salings, a convicted kidnapper serving a life term, confessed to killing a girl, later identified as Donna Prudhomme, in 1991 and dumping her body in the fields. At the time of the murder, Stallings was living and working in League City near the homes of some of the girls who went missing and were subsequently found dead. Despite the fact that his testimony shows great consistency with details, he has not been charged with any murders, but remains a suspect in the murders of Donna Prudhomme and Audrey Cook, as well as 2 unrelated murders in Fort Bend County. Clyde Hedrick was named as a suspect in the 2022 documentary series Crime Scene: The Texas Killing Fields. Hendrick was released from jail in 2021 after he was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of Alan Benson in 1984. Following his release, Hendrick has been living in a halfway house, and in July 2022, Tim Miller, the father of Laura Miller and founder of Texas EquuSearch, won $24 million in liability and damages after filing a 2014 wrongful death lawsuit against Hendrick, who was his former neighbour. Hendrick had been found civilly liable for Laura Miller's death, but was not criminally charged. Hendrick had a previous criminal record that included charges of trespassing, theft, abuse of a corpse, attempted arson, possession of marijuana, driving while intoxicated, and SA. Hendrick allegedly made a jailhouse confession to murdering Miller and Villarreal Fye. Suspected serial killer Clyde Edwin Hendrick was brought in for questioning in 1985 in relation to Beerson's suspicious death. He admitted that both of them had gone swimming in a nearby lake upon leaving a local bar, but he further stated that she had accidentally drowned while in the water. He then claimed to have disposed of her body out of fear of being accused of foul play. At the time, since her cause of death could not be ascertained, in 1996 Hendrick was convicted of abusing her corpse and was sentenced to a year in jail. In 2011, Hendrick's ex-wife approached authorities and said that Hendrick had frequently made incriminating remarks regarding Benson's death. This information, along with Benson's second autopsy, resulted in authorities getting an arrest warrant and charging Clyde with murder in 2014. Hendrick was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and was released from Estelle Supermax Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas in October 2021. In 1987, 30-year-old John Robert King phoned the El Paso police claiming that on the 24th of May 1986, he, together with 33-year-old Gerald Peters Worst, attacked Shelley Sykes while she was in her car, after which the girl was hard and strangled. After his arrest, Worst told police that he'd hidden the body in the fields where the other bodies were found. Both men were asked to indicate the whereabouts of Sykes' body in exchange for avoiding life sentences, but their directions failed to uncover it. King and Worst were convicted of aggravated kidnapping and received life imprisonment sentences in 1998. They were also probed for other such crimes committed during the mid-1980s, but both vehemently denied any involvement. King died from natural causes behind bars in October 2015, whilst Worst died in prison in October 2020. In April 2012, 16 years after Crystal Jean Baker's beaten, hard and strangled body was found, Kevin Edison Smith was arrested and convicted of unaliving her. In 2009, Smith had been arrested on a drug charge in Louisiana. At about the same time, a detective tested Baker's dress for DNA. A match was confirmed using advanced technology that was not available at the time of Crystal's disappearance. A jury deliberated for 30 minutes and found Smith guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison. In May 1997, William Lewis Reese was arrested for the kidnapping and attempted murder of 19-year-old Sandra Siparo from Webster. The following year, he was found guilty and convicted, receiving a 60-year imprisonment term. In 2015, his DNA was matched to the killer of 19-year-old Tiffany Johnson, who was found murdered in Oklahoma in 1997. After this revelation, Reese confessed to killing Jessica Lee Kane and Kellyanne Cox, leading the investigators to the bodies' burial sites. He'd been suspected of kidnapping and killing Laura Smither and confessed to friends with the police in 2016 that he had murdered her. In 2021, he was convicted of Johnson's murder and sentenced to death. The following year, he was extradited to Texas and convicted of the murders of Smither, Kane, Cox, receiving a life term and pleading guilty to each of the three murders.